Greetings. Last time we were admitting Mary into the temple. Now we're taking a glance at the Pharisees of the time and previewing John promised to Zechariah. So, subtext: a glance at the obduracy of the Pharisees. How obdurate and obstinate the priests and the Pharisees of the temple were may be discovered from the small esteem in which they held the distinctions bestowed upon the Holy Family. First, Joachim's offering was rejected, but after some months, both his own and his wife's were, by God's command, received. Joachim was admitted even into the presence of the Holy of Holies, and he, as well as Anne, was, though unknown to each other, led into the passage under the temple. There they met. Mary was conceived, and priests awaited them at the entrance of this cave under the temple. All that took place by God's command. I have seen that sometimes, though not often, the sterile were commanded to be let in there. Mary entered the temple in her 4th year, and in all things was she distinguished and remarkable. The sister of Lazarus' mother was her teacher and nurse. Her whole manner of acting was so remarkable, so marvelous, that I have seen great rolls written by aged priests about her. I think they still lie hidden with other writings. Then came the wonderful manifestations at Joseph's espousals, and the blossoming of his rod, the account of the 3 kings and of the shepherds, the presentation of Jesus, Anna's and Simeon's testimony, and the teaching of Jesus at the age of 12 in the temple. But all this the priests and Pharisees noticed not. Their mind was preoccupied by business and court affairs. Because the Holy Family lived in voluntary retirement and poverty, they were forgotten in the crowd. The more enlightened, however, such as Simeon, Anna, and others, knew of them. But when Jesus appeared and John bore witness to him, the teaching of the Pharisees was so directly contradictory that, even if the signs of his coming had not been forgotten by them, they would certainly not have been made known. Herod's reign and the Roman yoke had so involved them in quarrels and intrigues that their taste for spiritual things was weakened. They did not esteem John's testimony, and they soon forgot him after he was beheaded. They cared little for the teaching and miracles of Jesus, and their ideas of the prophets and the Messiah were altogether erroneous. It is not surprising, therefore, that they so shamefully treated Jesus and put him to death, that they disavowed his resurrection, the wonderful signs that followed it, and even the fulfillment of his prophecy respecting the destruction of Jerusalem. Nor is it to be wondered at that they neglected the signs that heralded his advent, since he had not at the time either taught or wrought miracles. Were the blindness, the obduracy of these men not so incomprehensibly great, could it have lasted even to this day? When I go over the way of the cross in Jerusalem on the present day, I frequently see under a certain ruined building a large vault, or many adjoining vaults, which are partly fallen in and filled with water. Standing in the midst of the water, which arises almost to a level with it, is a table. From the center of the table to the roof of the vault rises a pillar, around which are hung little coffers filled with rolls of writings. Under the table also I saw rolls lying in the water. Perhaps these vaults were once buried places. They lie under Mount Calvary. I think the ruined building is the house wherein Pilate once dwelt, and the treasure will after some time be discovered. Subtext: John promised to Zechariah. I saw Zechariah conversing with Elizabeth. He was telling her how sad he was because his turn to offer sacrifice in the temple was drawing near, and how he dreaded the contempt that they would there await him on account of his being childless. Zechariah went twice a year in the temple. He did not live at Hebron itself, but at the place called Judah, about 15 minutes' walk from Hebron. The ruins of the former buildings still lay between two places, leading one to fancy that they had once been connected. Many such ruins were to be found on the other side of Hebron, for the place was once as large as Jerusalem. At Hebron dwelt priests of a lower degree, and Judah those of a higher rank. Zechariah seemed to be superior to them all. He and Elizabeth were regarded with extraordinary veneration from the fact of both having descended in a direct line from the race of Aaron. I saw Zechariah with many people of this locality going to a little property that he owned in the neighborhood of Judah. It consisted of a house, an orchard, and a spring. I saw him there also with the Holy Family at the time of Mary's visitation. At the period of which I am speaking, Zechariah was teaching the people and praying with them. It seemed to be a preparation for a feast. He told them his great dejection and of his presentiment that something remarkable was going to happen to him. Again, I saw Zechariah with the same people going to Jerusalem, where he had to wait 4 days before his turn to sacrifice came round. Until that time, he prayed in the forepart of the temple. At last, when his turn came, he went into the sanctuary outside the entrance to the Holy of Holies. The roof over the altar of incense was opened so that the sky could be seen. The priest offering sacrifice was not visible to those outside. A partition concealed him, but the smoke of the incense could be seen rising. I think Zechariah told the other priests that he must be left alone, for I saw them leaving the sanctuary. Zechariah went into the Holy of Holies, where it was dark. It appeared to me that he took the tables of the law out of the ark of the covenant and laid them upon the golden altar of incense. When he kindled the incense, I saw on the right of the altar a light coming down on him, and in it a luminous figure. Zechariah, frightened, stepped back and sank, as if in the ecstasy. At the right side of the altar, the angel raised him up and spoke some words to him. Zechariah replied, "Then I saw something like a ladder let down from heaven, and 2 angels ascending and descending to him. One took something from him, but the other, after Zechariah had opened his garment, inserting a shining little body in his side, Zechariah had become mute. I saw him before leaving the Holy of Holies, writing on a little tablet that lay there. This tablet he had sent at once to Elizabeth, who likewise had a vision at that same hour. I saw the people outside were troubled and anxious on account of Zechariah's remaining so long in the sanctuary. They were even moving toward the door to open it, when Zechariah replaced the tables of the ark and came forth. The crowd questioned him about his long stay in the sanctuary. He tried to answer, but could not. He signified to them by signs that he had become mute, and went away. Zechariah was a tall and exceedingly majestic old man. End of reading. So notes. Pharisees are very much subscribed to the gospel of prosperity. I'm sure you've met these people. They're the ones who point at the lowly and the people who are unfortunate, the people who are poor, and say, oh, well, they're sinners. That's why they're in that position. And, well, we associate this with Freemasonry nowadays and other peoples. The real Pharisees, let's call them. But there's a lot of Protestants who act like this, and a lot of Catholics. Very nominal Catholics, let me remind you, but Catholics nonetheless. Next note, it kind of reminds me of Starship Troopers, where there's a scene where everybody's like, I'm doing my part, I'm doing my part, I'm doing my part. Like a montage of people living their everyday existences. And we're doing our part. Are you doing your part? That movie was wonderfully silly. It's too bad it was spoiled by the adult content. So, the Pharisees were almost a parody of themselves when they're pointing fingers at Zechariah and at Joachim for being barren or sterile. Okay, you don't know God's plans. It recalls me back to in John 9 when Peter questioned Jesus. Is like, okay, was he born? What was he afflicted with blindness because his parents sinned or because he sinned? And Jesus is like, stop subscribing to the gospel of prosperity, Peter. No, actually, he said neither. It was for the glorification of God. But anyways, yeah, he sort of said it. Next note, business and court. Oh yes, the Pharisees like to be involved in geopolitics. Doesn't that sound familiar? It should. Given the last 50, 60 years we've endured from the Vatican and the quote-unquote saintly popes, who were very geopolitical in nature. Keep that in mind. Because geopolitics seems to be the most important thing to Catholics these days. I think when Catholics realize that the world can only be fixed through prayer and penance, fasting and penance, fasting and prayer, people are throwing themselves in the fire and into water, right? It kind of reminds me of the two political party system. One of them's fire and the other one's water. And the apostles are like, oh, why can't we cast this guy out? Jesus is like, yeah, but this kind can only come out through prayer and fasting. You got to think above the flesh. As people, they're looking for solutions, but they can't find it because they're not spiritual enough. They always look for it in material places. Well, unfortunately, we got a Vatican that calls those traditionalists who love the old Mass, who love to revere God, who love ad orientem. They're calling them rigid and pharisaical. Well, who are the Pharisees now? She just almost de facto condemned this obsession with geopolitics. We got to keep our head in the clouds. And they're like, well, you got to get your head out of the clouds. No, you got to keep it in the clouds because it's the devil that's doing all of this, and he's the one that needs to be defeated. The sheep, the shepherds flock the sheep. That was the line in Braveheart, Longshanks. We got to take out the shepherd. The devil can only be defeated with humility. So you gotta have a special devotion to Our Lady since she's the icon of humility. So, anyways, oh yes. Jerusalem, or Bethlehem, the slaughter of Bethlehem. How long do you think it would have taken for the Pharisees to be like, oh, the slaughter of Bethlehem never actually took place. That's just a bad rumor that was started by a bunch of kooks. I bet you that they did that because you honestly think that the Pharisees then aren't like the Pharisees now, trying to shut down narratives? The whole reason they put Christ to death is because they wanted to shut down the narrative that he was the Messiah. They didn't like it. It caused an uproar in society. Guess what? Nothing's changed. Next, she called the shots. She said that there were writings that were not yet discovered. Yep. She wrote this in the early 1800s. Well, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. Guess what? There was a bunch of writings there. A lot of it was just the Old Testament, but some of it was writings that we've not before seen. We even found like what they call Gnostic texts through. I don't think the Essenes had them. I think other people had buried them. Anyways, that's that. She called the shot, and there's probably still more writings hidden. And the Essenes are the ones that hid many of these writings, by the way. Next. They must have made a new ark because as far as I know, the original ark was taken by Jeremiah away. And I think he put it in a spot not to be discovered. I don't know where he put it. By the prophet Jeremiah. So they must have made like a new ark to stand in the place of the Holy of Holies. Okay, last. Archangel Gabriel. He's talking to Zechariah. And Michael means who is like unto God. Just like how he put down Satan. Raphael means God heals, just like he acted in the book of Tobit. Gabriel's a lot more mysterious. His name means the Almighty God, the Almighty arm of God. And we see a lot of the Almighty God in Exodus when it's the Almighty God orchestrates the plagues, the Almighty God guides them through the wilderness. I wonder if that was Archangel Gabriel who was doing those acts, and he was with the Ark of the Covenant that they had built back then. Because they built the Ark of the Covenant, and then he guided them through the wilderness with a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day, which in itself has meaning. By day it's mystery, by night it's passion. So, which is like when we're in times of glory, times of peace, we want to contemplate the mysteries of God. When we're in times of extreme degeneration, we want to do penance. This is the fire of God. And we're in a time of extreme degeneration, so we're being guided by the fiery pillar, so to speak. Archangel Gabriel went from the old ark, where Zechariah was, and he was looking at the 2 tablets of the law, which must have also been reforged. And he went to the new ark in Luke 1 to Mary, and he gave her the news of Jesus. So, Archangel Gabriel is perhaps the keeper of the Ark of the Covenant. Anyways, that's it. Ave Maria.